together on seclosounds.org.
Your listening station.
Chariots of Pumpkins is from Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, made in 1982, and the third instalment of the Halloween franchise. Halloween 3 departed from the slasher film genre which the original two instalments spawned, instead featuring a witchcraft theme. You are listening to Seclo Sounds. Find us on the interweb at www.seclosounds.org. We then went on to discuss Alan's sound design for the hit movie The Hunt for Red October, which starred Sean Connery.
Right near the end of the 80s, 88, 89, I was very popular as a sound designer and worked with Paramount Pictures on The Hunt for Red October. And back to just the creative challenges, we actually got the Oscar that year for the best sound effects. You know, in a movie about submarines just calls out for sound effects because all the time we're watching people that are basically on this set that's been set to tip so that we can feel like we're going up and down and stuff like that. But there's no submarine around it. So creating the ambience of the submarine and the sound of what happens when we shift gears or we dive or we ascend, you know, and the compression on the hull, we think, you know, all the other stuff becomes very important and very elaborate. And I remember that there was the conundrum, we had the silent drive, and the question was, what's the sound of the silent drive? And it eventually was made out of the sound of a pile driver, actually, slowed way down, going...
The order is, engage the silent drive.
And then, you know, sort of the pumping thing, and then treated. And equipment-wise, I had also gotten what was the big gun digital synthesizer called a synclavier system. And I kind of became a synclavier nut and really focused on what that machine could do, and it was very cutting edge at the time. So that moved forward. I also worked on Back to the Future 2 and 3, and we got, you know, Oscar nominations for that. I did another Star Trek there. I think Star Trek up to 5 and 6 now. I made it all the way up to Star Trek 6. And then because I moved into the Skywalker complex, one of the movies I worked on while I was there was the Dracula movie, the Francis Ford Coppola Dracula. And we actually got another Oscar that year for the best sound effects on Dracula. So the sound effects world is kind of pressing on, and people are thinking of me more as a sound designer and also as a technician being involved with stuff. And in that same era, and this will be a secondary track, but it's sort of piqued my interest. I was given a book called The Rods of Amun-Ra by a fellow named Wesley H. Bateman. And this was a mathematical study of the architect of the Great Pyramid of Giza, mathematically, postulate being that whoever was the architect must have had a series of units of measure that were significant to him, and also why is it designed that way and why is it still standing? A journey into ancient knowledge, which really fascinated me. In this 800-page book, of which there was like 200 copies floating around amongst recording engineers and friends of friends, I got a copy of it. I read the whole thing cover to cover. And at the end of the book, he suggested that there were frequencies described by the pyramid. I went, what? So I literally got his number and called him up and said, hey, Wes, I just read your book. This is fascinating. I'm Alan Howarth. I'm out here in Hollywood. I do music and sound for films. What about these frequencies? Well, you know, he was a little cautious in the beginning, but one, he was thrilled that somebody actually read his book. And then second, he followed up on his ideas, because there's a guy that's living in the desert in north of Las Vegas on his own, but just a brilliant man. A little bit about Bateman. It turns out in the 60s, Bateman was in Los Angeles, and he used to give free lectures on UFOs in Silver Lake. And the attendees of his lectures was Gene Roddenberry and company.
Ah, right.
Well, the whole concept of the Prime Directive, the United Federation of Planets, and the structure of Star Trek, the source is this guy, Wes Bateman. So Roddenberry and his writer crew just come to these UFO lectures and just integrated everything into Star Trek. So this guy was actually the source of Star Trek, and here he is. I'm dealing with him now in pyramids and mathematics. And so the book was called The Rods of Amun-Ra. And so the mathematics that came out of the Rods of Amun-Ra we called Ra Math. and therefore the music that was described by the pyramid mathematics we called raw music. And I have this ongoing project that we call Raw Music. There's a website, ramusic.com, rawmusic.com. You can see what's there. The idea is that the designers of the Great Pyramid understood acoustics and natural measurement in such a way that the Great Pyramid is designed so precisely that the resonant frequencies or the waveforms and the wavelengths of the King's Chamber are on very specific frequencies, which we'll call a stargate or transcendence or religion or anything like that. It's actually brainwaves. Yeah. And so he postulated this idea in the book, but then I followed up on it, figured it out, converted the numbers to sound. And I remember sitting there, and the first time we had a little oscillator on the bench oscillator with numbers on it, and I had a little electronic synth there that I could retune. And he gave me one of the first frequencies, and the frequency was 423.997 cycles per second, or roughly 424 cycles per second. And this is pretty amazing, and I'm kind of deciding, what can I do with this stuff? And so I go back and I take all my keyboards and I retune them to this 424 stuff, and I'm working on a meditation CD called Paradise Within. And the woman I'm working with, Siobhan Avila, she's late that night. She's going to show up, so I'm just going to try this on myself. I sit down and I start to compose with the instruments retuned, and I hit the most creative. We pray for moments like this. The creative muse arrived, and I finished the last third of that record in 3 hours. Wow. And all my performance had no editing. Everything was perfect. This is a creative tool. So I continued on with that. I used it in my own compositions. I treated it very, very, I'll treat it with sort of a sacred viewpoint, that this was very special.
So this is something on the rawmusic.com site people can go and have a listen to?
Yeah, exactly.
Can we listen to some raw music now, do you think?
Sure. If you go to the Raw Music website, there's some great before and after comparisons. I've got a Beatles tune on there, before and after, and a John Lennon tune before and after, and it's just great. They're little clips, but I think you could put it together. When it's converted to the raw, notice that Paul McCartney's voice sounds more like the Paul that we hear when he speaks. So as I'm speaking to you right now, I'm actually in raw. It's a natural frequency. But when Paul has to sing the song with the guitars tuned to 440, he has to go up just a little bit, and there's a little more stress in his voice. So observe both Lennon and McCartney in the raw versions of their music sound more like them.
Okay, well, we'll have a listen to examples of raw music.
Cool.
First, we'll have the normal track, followed by the raw music version.
Get
together on seclosounds.org.
Your listening station.
You are listening to Plain Talking with your host, Mick Bannister. Joining me in the Departure Lounge is Alan Howarth, award-winning Hollywood sound designer, composer and musician. Alan is sharing his movie experiences and some of his favourite music. To contact the programme, please email plaintalking@seclosounds.org or just search for Plain Talking on Facebook.
More raw music can be heard at rawmusic.com and features tracks from John Lennon and Bob Dylan, as well as Paul McCartney, converted to the natural raw format. You are listening to Seclo Sounds. Check us out on Twitter @SecloSounds and email radio@seclosound.org. And now for my competition winner, who correctly said the song that played out the programme last week was, of course, Voulez-Vous from ABBA. Well done, Alison, in Northampton. I then went on to discuss with Alan what books he was reading and asked him some questions sent in by Seclo Sounds listeners.
In the world of sitting down and reading, it's difficult. I'm very busy, but the couple of books I've gotten and really are fascinated by are things on ancient architecture. Graham Hancock is in there for sure, Robert Bauval, all this looking at how the ancients must have had, I'll call it universal knowledge. Somehow they understand how things are not only on Earth, but how it's out there in the universe, and that the ancients built these things as monuments of stone. You know, the fascination of going to the pyramid and seeing this granite chamber up 10 stories with blocks of granite that are cut so precisely that there's virtually paper-thin mortar between them, and all so precise. And you know, there's things in South America made of blocks that it's just go, how did they make that down? Who did that? And everybody just kind of ignores that stuff. But I think we're coming to a time when this needs to be examined, and this goes with the Eric von Daniken stuff.